get home. But more and more, we're seeing all the genres working on xCloud. It's always a learning journey for us. We're still in that part of the process. But yeah, I'm pretty bullish on the capability over the long run of cloud to really unlock these games for really anybody on the planet who wants to play.
Do you think like cloud gaming, or at least with the Game Pass, could really take off if we don't have like a Call of Duty or a FIFA or Grand Theft Auto? Like, what will it take for that to happen?
Well, we're bringing some of our biggest games to cloud day and date with the launch. It's the nice thing about Game Pass. When we launch a game like Forza Horizon 5, which is so they can clearly buy the game if they would like, or they can subscribe as part of Game Pass, and then they get access to those games on the cloud, and they can play those games wherever they want to play. You know, at Microsoft, we look at this as a journey. I don't need everybody to start playing on cloud tomorrow. That's actually not even our goal. I don't need everybody to turn into a subscriber. I really believe in this diversity of business model, diversity of access as being a key to our industry's growth. I know it's easy to fall into some of the tropes of everything's going to be X or everything is going to be Y. What I've learned in my multiple years in gaming is that change is more gradual than that, and gamers will adopt to the things that bring them the best experience, not necessarily the kind of buzzword that's out there that everybody feels like you need to flock to quickly.
But I mean, will there be a day where we won't even see Xbox? I really believe in this. It will just be clicking onto our TVs, and we don't need an extra machine.
I don't think so. I think about music as my example. I'm a big fan of music. And with the advent of streaming music, when I look around me, I have more devices capable of listening to music than I did before, when it was just kind of LPs or cassettes or CDs. I think with the advent of streaming, we're still going to want to have, for those of us that it's part of our lifestyle, this kind of hyper realistic, hyper fidelity device that we plug into our television. That is our plan. Our plan is that consoles will be part of the equation for years and years to come, and that's why we've invested so much in this current generation and continue to invest. But not everybody's going to play that way. Just, sometimes I'm listening to my music over Bluetooth into my headset while on my phone. Other times I'm sitting there with a higher infidelity audio system. I think gaming will be the same way. Sometimes I'm playing on my PC, sometimes I'm playing on my console. And I think that choice of access, choice of business model, choice of creative is one of the things that will keep gaming growing. And over 3 billion people play games on the planet today. It's just crazy to think about. Nearly half the planet plays video games. And there's not one style of game, one business model of game, one device that people play on. Build around the player, enable the creators to do their best work, and I think good things will come.
Okay, because we saw the relationship between Microsoft and TV manufacturers. So when you hear about that, you start thinking, wow, could there be a day when we don't need an Xbox? But you're saying that for some people, they will want an Xbox machine. Other people may want to go straight through the TV, or we'll just do our phones or our laptops or whatever it is.
Yeah, our strategy doesn't hinge on selling one device. And I think if you're in the tech industry today and your strategy revolves around selling one device, I think that's a hard kind of road to follow. Just because today, as a consumer, I have choice on where my media comes from, where my news comes from, where I read, where I listen, where I watch. Like, it is really me at the center. So for us, I don't have to sell consoles in order for Xbox to be successful. I don't have to have Windows PCs solely be successful. I don't have to have cloud be successful. So I want to have a great console, and I love the consoles that we have in market. Like I said, we're committed to those over the long run, but I don't think it can be about one device to kind of rule them all. I really think the player rules it all, and the creators are right there behind them, building those amazing experiences for them to play.
Okay, let's move on to talk a little bit about Microsoft's gaming studios. You got, I think, 23 now. So is this acquisition spree over, or is it just heating up?
I'm really proud of some of the creators that have chosen to become part of Xbox. So many of these creators, they have choice. If you look at some of the people we've acquired and partnered with, it's people we've had long-term relationships with. And they've come inside of Xbox now, and they see our roadmap on platform and service. And I want them to be able to do their most amazing creative work as part of this team. We offer some financial stability for them. It's not about only the success of their next game. I want to give them some more creative capability. longer timelines when required to do their best work. And that's my goal. We're big believers in the power of content. You've heard Satya Nadella talk about it, Amy Hood talk about it. So we're always out there looking for people who we think it would be a good match and teams that would be a good match with our strategy. So we're definitely not done. There's no quota. There's no kind of timeline where I have to go acquire studios by a certain time. But if we find a studio where we have a good fit, we share what we're trying to go do and what they're trying to go do. And if we feel we can both get better together, absolutely. It's one of the kind of privileges we have of being at Microsoft and having the capability to take a long-term approach, and adding amazing creators to the portfolio is an important part of that.
And Microsoft has a reputation for acquiring, some big companies like LinkedIn and GitHub and giving them a great degree of independence. And of the studios you've acquired, the big one that pops in my head is Bethesda, and they're a big company. What's your strategy with the big game studios that you brought under your belt?
Yeah, it's similar. If you think about Todd Howard and the teams at Bethesda, we've known them for so many years, going back to the Morrowind coming to the original Xbox as their first console build of that game. It's a lasting relationship. So these relationships were really built on trust, on shared view of where this industry can go, and our ability to bet on each other on the path forward. And I'm excited about that. But absolutely, when I think about Bethesda's great at being Bethesda. I don't need Microsoft or Xbox to come in to help them be a better Bethesda than they were. I want to be listening. I want to be in listening mode with the creators, whether it's Bethesda or Tim Schafer at Double Fine. I think about all of the creators at Playground building Forza Horizon 5. There's amazing teams out there, and I want to be listening to those creators and getting the signal from them on what are they seeing, what are they trying to create, and then challenging ourselves as a platform company. Can we build the best platform for them so that they feel like they can do their absolute best work? And that's an ongoing journey, right? It's not a destination, it's a journey. We'll be on that journey for years, but having them be the best version of themselves and not somehow, all getting the kind of Xbox stamp if they don't want it is fine.
Right.
Keeping them independent is great.
But not every acquisition attempt has worked out. Discord didn't go your way. Talk a little bit about that, and are there any other deals that you want to go for but haven't been able to make it work?
It's a small industry, the game industry. It's funny to think about, from a business side, we're 220 billion dollars a year, growing by double digits. Like it's an amazing business when you think of just the scale of it. 3 billion people who play, and yet the industry people in it, it's still fairly small. It's growing, but we all know each other, and there's always conversations that are happening about how we can help each other. I think our biggest competitor, I always say, is apathy. It's not each other. As an industry, it is us continuing to push innovation together. And if there are big acquisitions or small acquisitions that we think can help us from an innovation standpoint, we've got a lot of support from Microsoft to go do that. So it's kind of a constant work for us to be talking with the world's best creators.
Okay, now let's talk a little bit about you, Phil. You've been at, you have the look in your face. You've been at Microsoft a long time. I understand you started as an intern, and now you're very high up. And my understanding is that gaming hasn't previously been part of Microsoft's senior leadership team. So how has that changed the role of Xbox within the company? It seems like it's more important than ever.
Yeah. It's been a really good journey with Satya Nadella, Amy Hood, the CEO and CFO, the board, and talking about the journey that we're on in gaming. We saw some trends. We thought we would see some disruption and some kind of translation of the games industry. We were seeing this potential for cloud. We were seeing the potential, the growth in digital, the importance of community and social, the importance of safety and security, areas that we're heavily invested in, both as a company and inside the gaming group. And when we sat back 5 or so years ago, sat with the board and really had a great discussion about where this industry was going, both from a scale standpoint, but also the transformation it was going to go through, and some of the strengths that Microsoft uniquely had, really around great game studios that we already had, and we've obviously added a ton in the time since. The community assets that we had with things like Xbox Live and Minecraft, just massive, massive communities. And we have this cloud capability that's very unique in the game industry when you think about the traditional competitors. And we said it's a big addressable market. It's an addressable market that we are already in, that's going to go through some transformation that we think benefits, and Microsoft can benefit from those transformations, and we can actually help the industry with some of the support that we can provide. And we were all in. And it's been amazing to see the amount of engagement. I report to Satya. He knows exactly what we're doing in the games business. He knows that Age of Empires 4 is shipping next week. And, it's great to have those conversations. And so, yeah, the support from the company has been awesome. And I'm lucky to be in this position and get to work with the amazing team that just does such incredible work for our fans.
But when you play video games with Satya, you let him win, right?
Of course. Of course. It is funny now. We'll get on Teams calls, and he really likes our Xbox wireless headset, and he wears them for Teams calls every so often. And it is funny to see him in a Teams call in a business meeting, and there he is with his Xbox gaming headset on every so often. It's really cool. But no, it's been such a fun journey to see, and we're kind of still at the starting line. I view it when I think about the opportunity that we have in front of us. When I look at markets like, the whole continent of Africa, 1.2 billion people, the average age is like 20. That I happen to be executive sponsor for our African Development Center. So I travel there, and I know that gaming is part of the culture there. It's not that I need to introduce anything. It's really just providing access. The internet's there in certain markets. It's very strong. And, we can do work. When I think about India, when I think about Southeast Asia, like so many markets, South America, I mentioned Brazil, there's so much more opportunity for us to help connect creator and player. I'm incredibly excited by that.
Awesome. I mean, Microsoft has been in gaming, you could argue, even before Windows, right? With like Flight Simulator. So
Flight Simulator is actually our oldest, or I guess I'll say our longest running, currently active development Microsoft franchise. Of everything we just shipped Flight Sim, the new one, last year. It's done really well. It's now on console. But yeah, we've been in the business 40 years. When you go back to Microsoft Adventure, even predates me. One of the few things around here that predates me at this company is our focus on gaming. And it's always been about growing and learning. But I'd say it's been the last 5 to 6 years where we've really looked at it as a core pillar to our consumer strategy, and an area where we think we have some real differentiation relative to the Microsoft competitors that are out there.
Gotcha. All right, we're running low on time, so I thought I'd take a question from some of the readers. We have, what are Xbox's thoughts about the relationship between VR, virtual reality, and Xbox going forward? Is Microsoft content to leave VR as a differentiator to PlayStation for the foreseeable future, and are there risks to doing so?
I think, that when we think about immersion, we think about mixed reality, virtual reality. I'll even take it to metaverse, which seems to be the buzzword of the day now. We're big believers in that software platform and the devices that will enable that. Absolutely. We're focused a lot more on the software side of that right now. When I think about immersive worlds, when I think about the connection of player and community, that's something that's very high on our investment list. We go forward. I think the devices that are out there now, we stay connected with a lot of the players that are out there. We'll put our people building hardware. A lot of that happens on Windows, and we experiment and talk to a lot of the partners that are there. I think that the hardware innovation that's happening is great, and it's an important enabler. Right now, I'm deciding to stay more in the software side of that enablement. I think I believe it will scale better in the long run. And I applaud what Sony's doing. I applaud what Oculus is doing, what Valve has done. I mean, there's a lot of good players out there that have done some amazing VR work. But yeah, we're going to stay as a company right now in the consumer space focused on software, and I think that's a good bet.
Got it. Okay, another reader asks, with more people playing games, is there such a thing as people playing too much?
We take the role of our platform and families and for individuals very, very seriously. We're out there with our stated policies on content, on moderation, on store. And one of the things with our controls, we have family timers that can be set up on a console. We have a pretty robust, we continue to invest on it, family app that a parent can use from their mobile phone to help direct what's happening on the console in terms of spending habits. Again, people who their family can play with, and time limits. Absolutely, like anything, gaming should be done in moderation, and we want to make sure that people feel like they have the tools to support that on our platform. It's kind of a core pillar of what we're about.
All right, since we're running low, I just want to throw one last question myself, something that I think is near and dear to my heart, and I think yours, and talk a little about the accessibility in gaming, because you guys, Microsoft put out a very special controller device for disabled people, and just want to know how popular is that item, and what's the feedback you've been getting from people?
Yeah, the Xbox Adaptive Controller, I know we're running short on time. I'll just say the story behind that, people can find it online, very special. It's actually a hackathon project, just in terms of really committed members of our team wanting to go do something, and then us greenlighting and eventually launching it. What I really like in this space all up, though, not just to make it about Xbox, is how the industry is leaning in. And we have this tagline, when everybody plays, we all win. And we really mean that if we can bring gaming to more people. And it's not just about the adaptive controller. Sony's first-party studios have done some really good work on accessibility. We're tackling more real-life issues in the video games themselves and making those games more available. And there's an incredible community of disabled gamers who are giving us feedback, who we're actually using before we're launching. They come and they give us feedback on the games and hardware to see kind of what can we make, how can we improve, how can we make things better. It is really about the diversity of voices that we hear in the player community and the creator community. It's one of, to me, the just really special things about gaming is bringing the joy and community of gaming to everyone and putting unique relationships together that frankly couldn't really be created in any other way. And whether that's somebody's ability, somebody's financial situation, where they live physically, what device they have, we want to make sure we have the ability for anybody to jump into Xbox, find a game that they would love, find a safe community for them to play with, and play some amazing games together. We think that's can be part of making this world a better place.
Well, that's a great way to wrap. We talk about the wonderful, positive things about gaming, bringing people together, having a good time. And with that, I'm going to go pick up my controller and go play something.
Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate the time today.
All righty.
Thank you, Sarah. And now, I want to welcome the folks joining us on Twitter for a special session of Tech Live. Now, you may know our next speaker as a 10-time NBA All-Star and a new forward for the new look LA Lakers. But off the court, Carmelo Anthony plays a few different roles. He's a published author who just came out with his second book, Where Tomorrows Aren't Promised, a memoir of survival and hope, came out last month. He's also a startup investor through Mellow 7 Tech Partners, the VC firm he started in 2013. I sat down with Carmelo Anthony, me, last week for a pre-recorded conversation about fostering innovation, his career on and off the basketball court. Here it is. First of all, Carmelo, I know you're getting ready for basketball season and it's afternoon where you are, but it's 5 p.m. where I am on the East Coast, and I want you to know what's in my glass here. For those of you who don't know, Carmelo, who's one of the great wine critics of the world, a true enophile, I think is the word, right? Has a YouTube series that turned into a podcast. It's called What's in Your Glass. He's had guests from Jamie Foxx to Sue Bird to Dana White. They talk about their lives and their career, but it always starts a little chat about what you're drinking and what your guest is drinking. And so I'm sort of embarrassed, but I think this costs about $9, Carmelo. But here we go. You know, I always laugh when I read those stories. You ever see those stories about where they bring the wine critics in, they give them like an $8 bottle and an $800
of course.
bottle? They can't tell the difference. I assume you can tell the difference at this point.
I can tell the difference. Yes, I can tell the difference. But I will say, I've had some some wines on the cheaper side that you would never know.
Now, you're in LA now, and I have to tell you, I know you've always had business in LA of some kind, but I'm worried. I'm worried about you. I think of you as a quintessential East Coast guy, born in New York City, born in Brooklyn, Baltimorean in your heart, someone who lives for brick, for concrete, for cold, for snow. No, I've seen this so many times. Like a New Yorker goes out to LA and they're just like, you know what? Like, there's sun and there's these palm trees and they got water, and then they never come back. Are you gone? Are we never getting you back?
No,
here?
I'm back. I'm back. I would like to say I'm a Four Seasons guy. I love Four Seasons. So
Okay.
and LA is great. I can see why people get here and just get stuck here. The weather just all year round, and just like you say, palm trees, sun, water. You have it all here. For me, I'm an East Coast guy. Like you said, I love it. I love the concrete. I love that jungle-esque, that mentality. I love the tenacity. I love the ferocity. Like I have to be in that in order for me to operate. If I just stick to one area, especially now, I can see myself just getting a little complacent, and I don't want to do that.
That's right. You got to get on a subway every once in a while, right?
I like to.
Sharp.
You can ride your bike. You can ride your bike out here in LA. It's a lot different than riding your bike in Baltimore or New York, for sure.
Have you found a good slice of pizza out there or no?
Not yet. I'm missing that, and that's one of my biggest cravings is a good slice of cheese pizza.
Now, we want to get to you today about your business interests and your tech interests especially, but before we get there, I want to talk to you about your book, which has just come out. It's called Where Tomorrows Aren't Promised, and it's more of survival and hope. And I can't lie, Carmel, we get books from athletes, sports writers all the time, and a lot of them are pretty boring, and yours is just the exact opposite of that. It's surprising. It's such a well-written, riveting book. But you made a very clear choice with this book. There was a way to do a Carmelo Anthony autobiography that's like, okay, here's the Syracuse stories, here's the Denver stories, here's the Knicks stories, but you didn't do that. You did a book that is very much personal to you, and it's about your journey from being a young man to becoming a man. And it's amazing in its level of detail, and you go very deep, very granular in your upbringing in Red Hook, Brooklyn, Baltimore, the struggles, but also the successes and joys that shaped you. And can you just tell me a little bit about that process of deciding to do the book this way? Because I'm sure people would have been fine if you did it another way.
You know what? It was, I always used to sit still and just be like, man, if I can, if I can tell my story, right? If somebody can play me, like I want my movie, I want a movie, like I want my story to be on a big screen. And I just will always try to visualize what that would look like, and then I would just be like, nope, I don't want it, because I would be too critical of it. And it would have to be right and exact. It would have to sound like me. It would have to talk like me. You have to walk and your mannerism would have to be on point. So I kind of shied away from that. And then it was just like, I've been through so much growing up, and even right before I got drafted, it was just, I need to tell this story. Like I've been suppressing a lot of emotions and a lot of feelings and a lot of thoughts from that part of my life and childhood growing up, that I never wanted nobody to know that part of my story, because I didn't want nobody to feel bad or say, oh, this is just another athlete story. It's just another, everybody has the same story, which we do. A lot of athletes have the same story. It's just your own personal experience within that story. And I always say like I am that. I'm from that. Nobody will ever be able to take that away from me. Even now, like I talk that language. I'm that appeal. Like I know how to have that dialogue with that community because my people are still there and I'm still tapped into that. So I just think the time of me writing that book, and especially me being, I feel like I'm connected to multiple generations right now. So I didn't want it to be 5 years later. It probably been too late to tell this story 5 years from now.
Yeah. I mean, I just was struck by the level of detail. And, these are stories that are now, what, some cases more than 25 years old. I mean, you tell a personal history, you tell a social history of the neighborhoods that you grew up in. You learn a lot about not just you, but the neighborhoods you grew up in and why they were the way that they were. Did you have to go and sort of revisit this past and go to these places, or was this all still very present in your head?
No, this is very present. This was very present because when I go back to the neighborhood and to those areas, this is all we talk about. These are stories that we always bringing up. Oh, remember that story? Remember him? Remember we did this? Family outings or holidays when you with the family, you sit around and you tell stories, you reminisce. So these are stories that was always that world, and I for so long I kept that so sacred to me because that's my makeup, that's my foundation. So I didn't want anybody else to look at that and frown upon that, and I just took the gloves off, and I really wanted to speak directly to you. Like I wanted to talk to you as if we was in the living room talking, having a conversation, and I'm just telling these stories.
Well, in sports stories, we both know, whether it's like the sports writing format or documentary format sometimes, like the past can get airbrushed. They can just say like, all right, well, he went to Towson Catholic and this is, he averaged this point. You don't. And the level of detail in this about the struggle of something like that in a school like that and the challenges you faced, even as you were reaching your dreams as a basketball player, was really, really important. And was it at all kind of, I don't know, cathartic is a word we use too much, but like, was it gratifying to sort of did you learn something about yourself through revisiting all this and appreciating that journey that you've been
Absolutely. It was, I was like, as I'm writing it, I was just writing stories down and talking about it, I started to realize like, damn, like you should be proud of who you are because it took a lot for you to get to where you are right now, right? And even in the way I structured it, it was from the day I was born to the day that I shook David Stern's hand and getting drafted. Like I wanted to end it right then and there because that's a new beginning after that. Everything else before that is the reason why I was able to walk across that stage. So I just really wanted to, again, speak directly, to my readers and to my fans and just to the, I really was catering it to the younger generation, but now I see like, I see older people that just coming to me and just saying thank you. And it made me realize that this is not just, it's my story, my experiences, but it's a universal story. And it's not, you don't have to be from Baltimore to go through some of the things, to deal with some of the things I had to deal with. You could be in middle America and still dealing with your own issues and your own problems. They might not be my issues or my problems, but we all going through similar situations and similar feelings and emotions.
Carmelo, I would take it a step further. You don't even have to be a Carmelo Anthony fan
Not at all.
or even really know what
Not
you
at all.
At all.
And again, that was a big part of it too. Is like I want people who don't know me to read this book and feel like, wow, like I know this guy. Like I know this guy now. Even if you never knew me or you never heard of me or whatever, I still wanted the book to appeal to you because there's something in that book that will appeal to you. There's one message or another that will appeal to you that you can relate to.
And the structure is very moving because, as you said, like you end with draft night and getting selected and putting on that hat and what a moment that feels like. But what's funny about it is that for most people, that's their introduction to an
Yeah.
athlete. You know, when the night you get up there on stage, the world knows who you are. And they don't know the 17, 18 years that preceded it to get there. And that's just such an interesting contrast to the way these sports stories normally get
And I didn't
told.
want it to be a sports story. I mean, sports is a part of it, but I never wanted it to be a sports story. I mean, we can Google the sports story. We can Google Melo at Syracuse and Denver and New York, and like we can Google all of that. I wanted you
Right.
to feel me where I'm coming from. I wanted you to, as if we were sitting down at a fireside chat, and you're really getting the chance to know me and kind of just
Yeah.
peel back these layers of who I am and these
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah. You've set yourself up for a sequel here. I mean, there is a second book that could be easily, I mean, I don't know if easy is the word, but you've certainly got potential. You've got a whole story to tell of your professional life and what it's been like the last couple of decades. Do you envision yourself going back there soon, or is that something you're willing to wait on?
I'm willing to wait on it because that part of it is not done yet. So I'm willing to wait on it. It's just I don't want it to be a traditional sports story. I don't want it to be a traditional, sports documentary. Or I don't want that. Like I have to be creative with it. Like I have to the way that I was creative with Tomorrow's Promise, the way that I'm able to take you down this social history and just what it was like and how Red Hook became Red Hook. How
So Dr. Chai, great to see you. Thanks for taking the time to sit down with us today. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here, Matt. Thanks for having me.
I have a lot I want to talk about with you today, but let's start with something on everybody's mind right now, which is the workforce return. You have, I think, pushed your official starting date at Google now back to January, as it stands now, in Alphabet, I should say. Where are you right now on returnees, remote work, mask mandates, test mandates, and what you expect to see in the workforce in the next few months?
It's a great question. Again, great to be here. And you're right, it's been the topic du jour. I've been amazed at how much time we have spent thinking about it. At a high level, we are operating with the view that the future of work will be flexible. It'll have inherent flexibility built into it. We deeply believe in the power of getting people together, which is why you saw us recently buy a building in New York and investing for the future. But we're roughly planning on a 3-2 model. We're giving people
3 days in, 2 days.
3 days in, 2 days off, 4 days complete flexibility to work from anywhere. And we are looking to accommodate about 20% of our workforce to be fully remote over time. So it's something we've been thinking about. We are giving people a lot more freedom to relocate to different ways. So trying to embrace and build in flexibility. And we also see it as an opportunity to evolve our products and services like Workspace. The challenge of hybrid work, some people being on video, some people in, how do you really make it feel like everyone feels they are fully participating? We are embracing it as a challenge to go to new places around the country and bring in people, be it DC, be it Chicago, be it New York, to change kind of the makeup of to bring in people with more perspective, a diverse workforce. So we've taken it as an opportunity. But we are beyond January, we are just going to tell people to make decisions locally, not centrally anymore, because different places in the world are going through different trajectories.
And you said, you worry about culture and people being together, and realistically, many CEOs feel collaboration in person makes a difference in terms of output and also a difference just in terms of culture, just people being together in a workspace. I know you've talked about it, I know you've thought a lot about it. So really, how are you going to have the culture you want to have and need to have, and that everybody can feel a part of, whether they're in the office or working remotely? That's going to really be a big challenge, isn't it?
It is, and we are kind of borrowing against the equity we had created, like, of many years of working in person together. So, which is why we believe in the power of physical spaces. So we are investing, we are reimagining it quite a bit, trying to create more collaboration spaces, fun places for people to come and get together. We do think we have to earn, like, it has to make sense for people as to, what they get out of by coming all the way to work, particularly if they're going to be on video at work too. So we view it as like we have to earn that thing, and so that's what we are trying to reimagine. But I think people also feel it, particularly new employees, younger employees. They are clearly, when we opened our New York offices back, we are up to 50% occupancy back.
And it's voluntary there.
Yeah, it is voluntary, but it's about 50% back. And last week we had lines in our cafes for the first time, and so the energy in the office was back there. And for what it's worth, it's anecdotal. People seemed really happy to be back, and so I do think there is an inherent human desire to come and connect as well.
Do you have a vaccine mandate there in New York for those offices or for some offices, or is it all voluntary?
It's voluntary, but to come into the offices, you need to be vaccinated. We are accommodating people who don't want to get vaccinated. You just can't come into the buildings, but you can work remotely. That's how we're managing it.
Say a little bit more about the New York investments, because you are talking about remote work, but you made huge investments now in new facilities, and clearly workspaces are very important to your future. So when you're talking about remote, is this going to be a permanent change, 3.2? Is it going to be a temporary change? Is it transitional? Is it here for, you're planning as if it's here forever, but realistically in 5 or 10 years, is this a new model for how Google should operate?
I think so. Even in places like New York and San Francisco, our employees dealt with long commutes, and that was a real issue. And so I do think people get a better balance in a 3.2 model. And our data shows that we can make that 3.2 model work. But the 3 is important. The 3 days in person is going to be important for collaboration and community, I feel. So it's about getting the balance, but we are embracing that. And it's not just in New York. We probably will invest in real estate around, because we want unique workspaces where it's easy for teams to do get-togethers. Or if you want to ideate something and collaborate, it should be much more seamless to do so. So we are reimagining it that way.
You were talking a minute ago about different offices, people working at home, diversity of your workforce, I think, in all ways, experientially, geographically. Is Silicon Valley different in terms of being the center of tech? Is tech everywhere now? Is it going to be everywhere? New York is becoming more and more important for technology. Washington, Atlanta, is Silicon Valley in that sense sort of lost some of the centrality for tech work, do you think, or is it on the verge of doing so?
It's a growing pie, so in some ways it's difficult to say. There are strong indications which tell me Silicon Valley is still doing amazing things and has access to the best talent possible, but there is more activity and energy in these other places than ever before. So I think it's a growing pie, and it's not just going to be Silicon Valley alone anymore. You are definitely going to see other places doing well, which is good, I think, overall. But the Valley still has something special. I haven't seen that part change yet.
I have to ask about your workforce a bit. You've had some famous moments at Alphabet with some vocal incidents with your workforce. You've got a union effort. It's a tiny fraction of your employees, but there's been a union effort there now. Between those efforts, and I should say, by the way, of course, a lot of companies are facing sort of employee activism, or even small groups of employees making a lot of noise. Between those incidents and the challenges of remote work, how are you dealing with kind of cultural issues, cultural concerns, or objections even inside the company, and how do you think about those? How's your thinking about them evolving?
That's a great question. I think in some ways, as a company from very early days, we realized we are as good as hiring the best people as a software company. And, we've deeply empowered our employees. pretty much 90% of the employees participate one way or the other in terms of being active and giving feedback through a given year. So we kind of track that. So we've had a participatory culture. I just had my company TGIF yesterday and took questions for, from the company, and I view it as a strength of the company at a high level, having employees be so engaged, deeply care about what the company does. Of course, at our scale, there will be times when we make decisions. Sometimes our employees may not agree. I think we have to be clear and transparent, explain why. And I think that's a new normal. If anything, we've been used to it for a while. I think you're right. I think more companies are going to see the transition play out. But we've always had a very engaged, as part of providing enterprise solutions, I would talk to other CEOs who are working hard to make sure their employees are engaged. And I've always felt we've been on the other side for many, many years.
Yeah, it's funny as we're sitting here. One of the big stories this week has been Netflix dealing with the Dave Chappelle special, and the employees are unhappy about that. And they've actually been pushing back a bit on the employees, and it feels like there's a walkout next week. We don't know how that situation will resolve, but it feels like you say it's a new normal. That employees speaking up and how to respond and how to deal it's a different part it's a new part of the toolkit for a CEO today that you have to learn to manage. So are you more vocal yourself internally, at least, at pushing back if you disagree, or saying I disagree with you, or you could have your opinion? And have you changed how you interact with your own folks on issues where they challenge you?
I view it as a strength, because running a large company, you want to make sure the company is doing the right things. So it brings a sense of accountability, which I've always viewed as a strength of the company. We've invested in channels and ways by which people can raise their concerns, and we've done better as a company there. And I think it's a process we've gone through is to be clear on the other side too. Explain ourselves, and sometimes we make a decision, and a set of our employees may not agree with it. But be clear and firm, and show that's what we are going to do. And I think it's important. There has to be a dialogue of respect on both sides, I think. But I think CEOs need to embrace the fact that in the modern workplace, employees want to have a say in where they work, and I think there is strength in that too. So I think that's the way I've looked at it.
Yeah, interesting. Your own morning routine is pretty well documented. I think you've talked about it quite a bit. You wake up early. You read a physical newspaper, eat breakfast, and you try to think sort of about a big project. During this time of remote work and
getting used to it. I may go back. I missed the.
do you go to the website, or do you get like a digital, facsimile of the print paper? How much are you going in right now?
This week I've been in every day, but it's been about 2 to 3 days a week. Yeah.
And how crowded is it when you go in?
Bay Area, it's still, I would say, about 20 to 30% voluntary back. I said New York is 50%, so it's a whole range.
I want to ask about a few other things, of course. So, in your morning routine, you think about big projects.
Not be, it's predicated on the digital world, social media. So they're going to take control of that. And as we see, this generation is taking control of them, and not just athletes, but just in general across the board. They're taking back control of what who they want to be, how they want to do it, when they want to do it, and why they want to do it. So, and they not dependent. They not dependent on anybody. So, for me, it's like, okay, I sit back and say, okay, I don't want to disrupt that. I want to bring something to that. I want to adapt to them. I want to adjust to this generation. I want them to tell me what they see. I want them to be the voice, because when they're the voice, they're loud, and when they're not the voice, then that's where the issues come into play.
We don't have much time left, but I want to get to a couple of quick things. First of all, we talked about the podcast at the top, and how do you like being on the other side of the microphone? You've had a million people stick microphones in your face. I've seen it in Madison Square Garden many times. How do you like being on the other side of it?
It's fun, man, because you know what I do. I try to bring positivity to my podcast, and just we have candid conversations with just friends, and and just celebs, or it may not be a celeb, but it's living room conversation for me. We have who don't want to have a great conversation over a glass of wine, and then the second glass of wine is where the conversation gets much better. So I just felt like I just want to bring some positivity to that, because it's so much negative energy that's out there, and I don't want to be a part of that. So when you come on What's in Your Glass, we're gonna drink, we're gonna laugh, we're gonna talk about what you have going on, we're gonna hit some issues, but we just gonna have good conversation, and it's no negative components to that.
Yeah, no, I was struck by the ones that I listened to. It's both the conversations and interview, but also kind of a mood, right? It's just
It's a
kind
vibe.
of like a good
It's a
vibe.
vibe. It's a vibe. It's a vibe.
Yeah. All right, so you're on this new basketball team. I don't know if people know this. They're called the Los Angeles Lakers, apparently. They've won some championships. I don't know. They got some players. What is it like to be on this team? I mean, people are saying there are, 6 future Hall of Famers on this roster, which is insane. There are huge championship expectations, but these are people you've known for much of your life at this point, a lot of these guys. What is the vibe there? What is the vibe like in Lakers?
It's good, man. It's it's like you just starting to ride the bike. Like you just starting to learn how to ride a bike, and once you get it and once you hit that groove, it's going to be the greatest feeling that you can ever experience. So that I think that's where we at right now. We're getting together. We're trying to build this bond and this camaraderie, and honestly, we're just trying to. We see the journey in this. We see the marathon race. This is not just a sprint. Like, this is a real marathon. We got 6 to 8 months of basketball that we're about to play. So it's like we have to really be strategic and smart on how we're going to approach this season. I mean, we do have 6 Hall of Famers on our team, and I didn't realize that until you just mentioned that. Like, that's insane. When you think about it, when you think about it, to have that much on one team, just from that stature, um, that means a lot. And we hold each other accountable. We push each other. We yell at each other. We curse at each other. We scream. We laugh. We joke, and that's just who we are. And I think that's what's gonna get us through and help us when that time is needed.
I got to figure with that amount of experience, there's perspective. This is not a team that's going to freak out when you lose 2 in a row in November,
experience,
right?
experience.
Yeah. I mean, I look at this next chapter in your career, since the West Coast years, right? And I look at what you've been able to do and kind of refashion yourself as this contributor who can take the reins when needed. And
So Nopar Chai, great to see you. Thanks for taking the time to sit down with us today. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here, Matt. Thanks for having me.
I have a lot I want to talk about with you today, but let's start with something on everybody's mind right now, which is the workforce return. You have, I think, pushed your official starting date at Google now back to January, as it stands now, on Alphabet, I should say. Where are you right now on returnees, remote work, mask mandates, test mandates, and what you expect to see in the workforce in the next few months.
It's a great question.
Sense sort of lost some of the centrality for tech.
And I think that's a new normal. If anything, we've been used to it for a while. I think you're right. I think more companies are going to see the transition play out. But we've always had a very engaged, as part of providing enterprise solutions, I would talk to other CEOs who are working hard to make sure their employees are engaged. And I've always felt we've been on the other side for many, many years.
Yeah, it's funny as we're sitting here. One of the big stories this week has been Netflix dealing with the Dave Chappelle special and the employees who are unhappy about that. And they've actually been pushing back a bit on the employees, and it feels like then there's a walkout next week. We don't know how that situation will resolve, but it feels like you say it's a new normal, that employees speaking up and how to respond and how to deal it's a different part it's a new part of the toolkit for a CEO today that you have to learn to manage. So are you more vocal yourself internally, at least, at pushing back if you disagree, or saying I disagree with you, or you could have your opinion? And have you changed how you interact with your own folks on issues where they challenge you?
No, I view it as a strength, because running a large company, you want to make sure the company is doing the right things. So it brings a sense of accountability, which I've always viewed as a strength of the company. We've invested in channels and ways by which people can raise their concerns, and we've done better as a company there. And I think it's a process we've gone through, is to be clear on the other side too. Explain ourselves, and sometimes we make a decision, and a set of our employees may not agree with it, but be clear and firm, and and show that's what we're going to do. And I think it's important. There has to be a dialogue of respect on both sides, I think. But I think CEOs need to embrace the fact that in the modern workplace, employees want to have a say in where they work, and I think there is strength in that too. So I think that's the way I've looked at it.
Yeah, interesting. Your own morning routine is pretty well documented. I think you've talked about it quite a bit. You wake up early, you read a physical newspaper, eat breakfast, and you try to think sort of about a big project. During this time of remote work, and has anything changed in your routine, or any practices that you've adopted or modified because of the unique circumstances?
Surprisingly, after about 20 years, through the peak of COVID, since the physical paper wasn't coming, I finally made a transition to reading it digitally, and getting used to it. I may go back. I missed the.
Do you go to the website, or do you get like a digital, facsimile of the print paper?
I go to the website because I find it the most convenient way, and I definitely read the Wall Street Journal every morning. And I may go back to the tactile feeling because it was a calmer way to think about things. But more broadly, sorry, you're asking what has changed beyond that? Yeah. I would say there is definitely. I miss my morning commute on days I don't go in. It was a time, I would have the space to think about, kind of do deeper thinking. Now I feel like I'm more reactive so I'm trying to carve the time back again. So hopefully going back in will restore that as well.
How much are you going in right now?
This week I've been in every day, but it's been about 2 to 3 days a week.
Yeah. And how crowded is it when you go in?
Bay Area, it's still, I would say, about 20 to 30% voluntary back. I said New York is 50%, so it's a whole range.
I want to ask about a few other things, of course. So, in your morning routine, you think about big projects, big picture things. Alphabet's performed very well on your watch. The stock has done well. The financial performance has been strong. The criticism that you've gotten at times is that Alphabet isn't the innovative force that it once was, that it's a more mature company, it's a bigger company, it's a more slow-moving company. I know you've heard the criticism. Is it fair?
Innovation is something I think you have to prove it, you have to earn it. One of the biggest areas of deep innovation I believed in, I've always believed in deeper technology work and then applying it to, make a difference in day-to-day lives. And we've spent over $100 billion in R&D in the last 5 years, and I viewed AI as one of a foundational, one of the most profound investments we are making. And the challenge I'd given the company was to use that investment to just build helpful features. And I see evidence of it every day. If you're in Gmail and you're typing, and Smart Compose saves you time. In our upcoming Pixel phone, if you look at how voice typing works, or how you can real-time talk to another person in a different language and the translation happens on device in real time. So the power of what we are putting on people's fingertips across our products and services, be it maps, search has literally transformed itself using AI in the last 2 to 3 years. We've introduced completely different, be it BERT or Mum. These are modern AI models which really improve search quality, which is what keeps us ahead of everyone else. And so When you have 10 products with billions of users using them, to me, we don't want to add complexity to users. Innovation for me is about people are relying on these products all the time, just making life easier for them, in micro moments across. So that's how I think about it. There'll be bigger leaps, but those happen over time, and we're working on those as well. And so, it's a combination of both.
It's interesting though, because I think maybe reading between the lines, I guess there's maybe a romantic notion or a sort of a unrealistic notion sometimes that innovation is just gigantic steps forward, and you have those moments. The iPhone changes everything. And then people think, what's the next iPhone? What's the next thing? And what you're really getting at is there's a lot of little things. Innovation is smaller movements, little things. I think that lead to big things sometimes, but that maybe that isn't appreciated enough.
Oh, I absolutely think so. Yeah.
Let me ask you about the privacy debate. Of course, it never really goes away. And you're facing a lawsuit now, of course, involving incognito mode from some users claiming that there's unlawful tracking. And using people's data has been central to the success Google has had. But there is a big debate, as you know, going on about privacy, a lot of concerns, a lot of challenges about it right now. As the debate evolves, how at odds are changing notions of privacy with Google's business model? And does the business model need to change itself here because of that?
Look, I mean, privacy, we've always, we've built products like, take a product like Gmail for now 16 years, and we deal with people's most sensitive information, and people trust us. When I look at the queries coming in through search and stuff, it's a trust we work hard to gain. And privacy and security, because, one of the biggest risks to privacy is the data getting compromised too. So those two have been foundational investments for us. I think people's privacy expectations are constantly evolving. We work hard to stay ahead. Most of the data today we keep is for the benefit of the user and to give it back. We support our products through advertising. Increasingly, we are offering alternate models as well. So for example, Google Apps don't have advertising and they're subscription-based. You can use YouTube that way. But even in advertising, we need very limited information to make sure that the ad is relevant to you and that enough people find the ad effective. We have clear roadmaps to do all of that in a privacy-safe way too. So AI, counterintuitively, will help us do more with less data over time. And so I think we will have good frameworks to evolve things in putting people's privacy first. But people do demand experiences. We are listening to our users. That guides us. People want to make sure. People tell us we have done a good job if we remind them that they are maybe going to be in New York and it's going to rain and maybe they need to pack an umbrella, right? And so, or they want the fastest direction home at the end of a long day. And so, so it's the trust. We listen to that, and we are building experiences for users. That's what guides us. And one of the biggest changes we announced is by default auto-deleting your activity data. Now it's on by default. So if for over 2 billion accounts, I think, by default we automatically delete the data after a period of 18 months. And we give them choices. It can be 0, 6, but your experience changes. And so I view this as we have to make sure we are giving people benefits, and people need to feel they have choice and control and transparency. And that's the foundational principles. On the other side, from an economy standpoint, I see it. For a small business, as large companies, sometimes as a small business, you have $1 million budget next year, and you're selling bikes or new products. You need to spend that effectively, and that's the difference between growth and not being able to grow as a company. So I think a lot of the economy works that way. The web depends on it, so we feel responsibility on both sides. But it's an important balance. But we'll always, really focus on getting privacy and security right. But the biggest privacy risk most users face is security. If you look at all the breaches, so the work we do to keep users safe in products like Gmail, et cetera, it's state-of-the-art work, and our advanced account protection program, we do it for journalists around the world. So that's where we put a lot of effort in as well.
Well, what's changed that made security? It is a big issue. Lots of CEOs and executives talk about it and face it. The attacks, I take it, the kind of cyber hacking attacks and other things are worse than ever right now. And what's causing that?
Look, there's a lot of financial incentives for many people. If you think about it, the world of cyber doesn't have norms and conventions we have established in the real world, right? You don't have the Geneva Convention equivalent on the cyber world. So over time, I think we need to internalize that, and governments on a multilateral basis, the G20s, et cetera, need to put it up higher on the agenda.
You're calling for regulation on that front.
I'm calling for global frameworks. You're going to need it for areas like cybersecurity, just like we have it in the real world. And if not, you're just going to see more of it because countries would resort to those things. And so I do think you're going to need more frameworks like this for time.
That's a good, actually a good segue to, I wanted to ask, just to finish one thought on privacy. obviously you've been grappling with different regulatory concerns for a long time in different parts of the world. Europe has their approach. You've got the U.S. Periodically, you've been you testified to Congress, and I know worked on this issue very much. Should there be one privacy standard everywhere? And if there is, what should it look like? What's the right balance in your mind on privacy between what the government's interest and you as a company?
It's a great question. I don't want to say there should be one privacy standard, because at the end of the day, it gets to the sovereignty of each country. Each government, each country is it's contract for what they want to give, the protections they want to give its citizens. But I think having a common framework, the more commonality there exists, it helps. Part of the reason I thought the digital single market in Europe was a good idea was because if you were a European company starting up somewhere in Europe, you had to deal with 25 different regulations. Unlike in the US, you could scale up much better, right? So I think having common frameworks help. I think the GDPR has been a great foundation. I would really like to see a federal privacy standard in the US. I'm worried about a patchwork of regulations in states. That adds a lot of complexity. And I actually think it's counterintuitive. Larger companies can cope up with more regulations and entrench themselves. And whereas for a smaller company to start, it can be a real tax. So I do think the internet works well because it's interoperable, it's open, it works across borders, promotes trade across borders. And so as we evolve and regulate the internet, I think it's important to preserve those attributes.
There's another area I wanted to ask you about that is at the heart of a lot of regulatory discussions right now, and that's climate, which I know you have said climate change is the most profound risk we face, and it's something that you're thinking about a lot. We're a few weeks away from Copenhagen, and there's an administration right now in Washington that is thinking a lot about financial disclosures on climate change and other regulatory measures relating to how to measure carbon. Do you have thoughts as you look to Copenhagen about what is the kind of right balance between public sector or even multi-governmental regulation or monitoring versus the role of the private sector? And do you see that we're going in the direction that you think is the right direction in terms of thinking of that balance? Like, what should happen?
Now, one thing to start with, you earlier asked about innovation. I think an area where I would like people to remember Google as having been innovative is in climate. We became carbon neutral in 2007. We have taken a moonshot to be 24/7 carbon-free by 2030, and that's going to need a lot of R&D, a lot of investments, which we think will help benefit. In this area, I'm a fan of. I think this area could be a model for both private-public collaboration. I think you'll genuinely see every CEO I talk to, it's on top of mind now, and it wasn't a few years ago. So I've seen an exponential change in how top of mind it is for most of our partners, most of our customers. In fact, through cloud, we are giving visibility into carbon footprints for a lot of our customers. They are asking for it. And so there is a profound change underway. So companies are eager. To your earlier question, employees are demanding this as a value. And I think it's an innovation opportunity too. Governments rightfully are focusing too. Obviously, you have to get the balance right. There could be energy crisis. The economy needs to keep working. But I see a better chance for both public-private partnerships. And I do think cross-country collaboration in this area, there are a few areas like AI, cyber, climate, because we kind of share one thing. And I don't think there's anything called safety for one without all of us working towards common safety. So I think it'll end up being important.
Do you think when you look at the dialogue and hear the conversations going on, and think heading into these talks in Glasgow, I said Copenhagen, but I meant Glasgow in a few weeks. Is the tenor of the conversations, the proposals, the ideas that you're hearing sort of in line with where you think we should be going in terms of public-private partnership? Do you see anything that concerns you, or do you worry about either not enough investment or over-regulation or particular kinds of, do you have particular concerns as to how the conversation's evolving?
I've definitely seen an inflection around governments reaching out to companies. So, over the last few years in Europe as well as in the US, I've definitely seen requests for private companies to come up with solutions to partner more. So I do think it's happening. There is some chance in this area. You always feel like, are we, worried that we could be behind, and so I feel a sense of urgency. But I realize there are complex policy issues here. I have taken an R&D view. Earlier we were talking about how vaccines came about and the miracle of what happened with COVID and vaccines. So in some ways, as a company, we are trying to say, what are the foundational technologies which can give us breakthroughs here in a way that makes all this transition, much less painful. And so that's part of where I'm spending my energy and time. But there are many, many pieces of this puzzle.
I have to ask on this subject, and then I'll move on to a couple of others. But YouTube has recently taken a stand about advertising next to what it sees as misinformation on the topic of climate, and of course, that moderation speech issue is a recurrent one for the websites right now. I'm sure every time you take a stand like that, there are strong views on both sides of the issue. On some level, though, aren't you basically acting as a publisher when you have to make decisions like that? Realistically, making those kinds of decisions about content and how to monitor it or what's acceptable or not, that seems like something that is not going away for a big company like Alphabet, like Google.
Look, I mean, both across search, YouTube, etc., we have a deep commitment to freedom of expression. We fight for it around the world. In fact, in many countries, we work hard to keep up information, and so we always work from that bedrock principle. I would say one way you can think about it is at the end of the day, we are trying to balance content creators, users, and advertisers. So even in that area, that policy change, there's a lot of brand advertisers on YouTube. They don't want their brands, and so you can look at it from a free market basis and say they don't want their ads next to content because they think it's brand negative, right? And so in some ways, the incentives of the ecosystem actually, which I think helps get to the right decisions over time because there's a balance there as well. And we still want, you can go debate things in YouTube, and we see plenty of debate all the time. There are areas where there is commercial spam, definitely, and we have to respect where advertisers want to spend their money, and if they pull out, creators suffer too, and we as a company are incented to get it right, even from a business viewpoint for us too. So I think we view it with that lens as well, which is sometimes not that well understood.
And are there areas of controversial topics or controversial speech, though, where beyond what the advertisers think, your view is it has to be protected, it has to be carved out? I mean, that must come up sometimes too for you.
All the time. The way we do is, COVID has been an area, right? And in some ways, the way we approach it as a company differently is, many years in search, we've been ranking to raise high quality information. So for the past 4 years, we've taken that approach in YouTube. The answer is a lot of times raising authoritative information, including news sources. So that's been an important part of what we do in YouTube. We're also trying to find, expert organizations which people would accept. That's always harder than you realize. In some countries, public health authorities are viewed as an authoritative source, and it's a bit more controversial here in the US. But so those are all areas we are trying to find the right balance. So in COVID, authoritative sources for us would be news organizations, expert medical organizations, think a Mayo Clinic or a Cleveland Clinic, and institutions like that.
Okay, I'm going to try to squeeze in one more topic I want to hit on quickly, which is China. Of course, China's in the middle of sort of a big reset on its business sector, on its tech sector. This week, we have seen LinkedIn say it's the last social media company in the West to leave China. Are we really headed now for sort of a broad tech decoupling more fully between the West and China, and almost two kinds of tech systems? Is that really what's happening? How do you see sort of the relationship between the West and China in terms of technology shaping up, and who's got the edge in some areas, and are we really headed for a deeper competition?
There is, there's been a real bifurcation of consumer services going on for a while. We don't provide any of our core services in China, and we haven't done for a long time. And you may see that happen increasingly more. There are, interestingly, in areas like AI, cybersecurity, or energy, there may be more coupling, to my earlier point, because they kind of work across. And those will be interesting ways we would need to think about the future. I think, by the way, and in many places around the world, be it in Southeast Asia, et cetera, we do compete vigorously with Chinese companies and to provide services in those regions. And so there's a lot of competition we face there as well. But in terms to your question about who's ahead or something, areas like AI and quantum, where we are deeply investing, and it's one of the things, as a large tech company, we can take a long-term view and do so, particularly at a time when governments have slightly pulled back on basic R&D funding. And we are investing deeply, and we are staying ahead, and we work closely with the government in the US on areas like cybersecurity, and so I think it's important to stay ahead. And so,
and just to follow up, government's pulling back, but you've heard both administrations of the last two in the US talk about ways of working more closely with companies, R&D money, or closer collaboration. Are you seeing it? Is that a good idea? Should the government be supporting certain kinds of tech research, either with money or more deeply, that in a closer public-private partnership than perhaps has been the norm in recent history here?
I think, I'd be careful about the government has limited resources and it needs to focus. But all of us are benefiting from foundational investments from 20, 30 years ago, which is what a lot of the modern tech innovation is based on, and we take it for granted a bit. So when I look at, be it semiconductor supply chain, quantum, which will take a decade to do that, government can play a key role, both in terms of policies, allowing us to bring in the best talent from anywhere in the world, or participating with universities and creating some of the longer-term research areas, which private companies may not focus on day one, but plays out over 10 to 20 years. So I see a role, and I do think public-private partnerships here can be a good template, and so I've advocated for it. I'm heartened by the fact that in a bipartisan way, I talked to senators on both sides. This is an area, there's bipartisan interest in making sure, we are thinking about it for the long term.
Okay. Sundar Pichai, thank you very much for the time today and the conversation. Really enjoyed the chance to sit down with you.
Thanks, Matt. Pleasure to be here.
Hi, Sal. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Julie.
So the pandemic revealed a big digital divide in our country. How can private and public sector funding bridge that divide?
First principles about how to drive the largest
Yeah,
possible returns.
as you mentioned,
And
the
at the end of
good
the day,
news
especially
is,
with
well,
early
there's a few
investing,
things.
it
When I
starts and
started
stops with
working
the
on Khan
founders and the
Academy
community that we can build.
14 years ago, there was a huge digital divide in classrooms, and I'm speaking about U.S.
And
Obviously, when
I
you
want
go
to talk about that. I mean,
internationally,
one of the
it's
elements
worse
of the
in
firm
many
that strikes me
cases.
as somewhat unique
The U.S.
is
has
this
done a
kind of
pretty
growth
good
and
job
caregiving
over the last
commitment.
10
You're
years
putting
closing the
aside
divide
extra
in the
money
classroom
here.
setting. But to your
How does
point,
that work?
the pandemic
and
put
why
a
did you
huge
decide to
spotlight
sort of
on it in
prioritize
the
that?
at-home setting. A lot of people are calling this
Yes,
the
I
homework
would
gap.
love to talk about this. This is one of my absolute favorite programs that we have here at the firm, and I really think it's a great differentiator for us. So as they say, you can't take the HR out of the lady. And so when I switched from being an operator on the people and culture side of the house and transitioned over to here to being an investor,
Is rooted in things that I've learned, things that I've experienced, and much like the ancient Greeks in 776 BCE, who thought they were bringing together the greatest athletes in the world for the first ever Olympics, there were a lot of folks that they didn't even know existed who never got an invite that day. And reflecting back on my career thus far, I realized there's a lot more to do, and a lot more in the way of returns to generate with a very principled approach to how we build a venture firm and all parts of it. And I'm lucky to have a partner like Caitlin to really pave the way, taking her expertise from building people and culture organizations. And so it comes down to everything, even the very people we make money for. We said from day one, half of our LP base was going to be women, 15% of our LPs are going to be Black or Indigenous people, simply because we operate in the United States, we invest in the United States, the market that we look to is the United States, and we don't want to have any blind spots there. And being intentional about even the organizations we make money for and the individuals we make money for is just one more way to make sure that we're staying ahead of all the potential greatest athletes, so to speak, that we could be in front of. But it's bled into the way that we hire, the programs that we've created that I definitely want Caitlin to talk about, like our 2% caregiving and wellness program. We want to think from first principles about how to drive the largest possible returns. And at the end of the day, especially with early investing, it starts and stops with the founders and the community that we can build.
And Caitlin, I want to talk about that. I mean, one of the elements of the firm that strikes me as somewhat unique is this kind of growth and caregiving commitment. You're putting aside extra money here. How does that work, and why did you decide to sort of prioritize that?
Yes, I would love to talk about this. This is one of my absolute favorite programs that we have here at the firm, and I really think it's a great differentiator for us. So as they say, you can't take the HR out of the lady. And so when I switched from being an operator on the people and culture side of the house and transitioned over to here to being an investor, something that Alexis and I talked about a lot, I mean, long before we even had a name for the firm, was really about how we were going to take advantage of caring for our founders and how we could translate some of these policies and some of these practices that I'd helped create over the years at the various startups that I'd worked for, and really translating that to the world of venture. And so, I think that as a venture fund focused on people and culture, 776 believes that an early stage company success is synonymous with the well-being of its founder. And so, backing a startup should be synonymous with supporting the people behind it. And so, the initiative really started from us. And we believe very genuinely that if we invest in a founder's well-being, they in turn will then invest in their team's well-being, and then the company will prosper, creating these outsized returns. And so, To give a little bit more color on the 2% program, which, by the way, is something that we also have open sourced. This isn't just about creating the best venture capital firm possible, although we do have very, very large, audacious goals there. We want the whole industry to be better and to be thinking about not only personal growth and development, but caregiving, and really inviting that into the core and fabric of who we are, not only as an investor, but also as a company ourselves. And so I would say at its most basic, we recognize that the role of a founder's wellness and how that plays into the performance of their company. And so what we do is we allot an additional 2% on top of every pre-seed and seed dollar that we invest straight into this program. And so those dollars are earmarked for our earliest stage founders for their growth and caregiving needs. So 1% is for growth and caregiving, growth and development. And so that can be used for anything like executive coaching, therapy, upskilling, personal training, a surfboard, whatever, so long as it enables their personal development and their holistic wellness. And again, we do this so that they can show up for their teams balanced, healthy, and ready to truly innovate. Now, the remaining 1% is specifically designated for caregiving. So we want our founders to feel like they have the necessary resources to really invest in those that they love and they care for themselves. And so these dollars then can be used for, babysitting, to have a date night, or childcare. That's important. But it can also be used for things like travel expenses to visit a sick loved one, home renovations to accommodate your in-laws moving in, or simply upgrading a space to better support a dependent that maybe has a disability. So at the core of it, this program is really designed with flexibility and inclusion at the center so that we can best take care of our founders, and they in turn can then best take care of their teams.
And are people using this money? I mean, are your founders tapping these funds?
Yes, they're our favorite checks to write. In fact, next to investing, next to that initial check that goes in, maybe I should say these are our second favorite checks to write. They are using them, and they're being so creative with how they are using them, and the response really has been phenomenal. We plan on doing a big write-up and giving some transparency to some of those creative ways that they are taking advantage of these dollars.
And a cynic might say, well, these founders are just going to use this for lavish perks and treat themselves to blah, blah, blah. And the reality is those folks have probably never actually built businesses with teams where they tried to encourage their own employees to take advantage of benefits. Because if they had, they would know this is actually a great challenge, right? You actually have to do the work to remind people these programs exist, to give them opportunities to if you're worried about things like that, you're probably investing in the wrong founders in the first place. And what happens time and time again is early stage investing really comes down to investing in founders. I know that was what Y Combinator bet on, because our original idea was rejected. They handed us a check and just said, hey, go build something and we'll back it. And it was a belief in a founder before a product and a market. And that's what early stage investing often is. And so if you agree that that's really important and the founder really matters when you're deciding to write the check, then it should seem just as obvious to make another investment in the founder's mental health and physical health and wellness and well-being, because they are the most valuable asset at the firm. And again, this is purely motivated by capitalism and greed, okay? This is done so that the very best founders have one more reason to take a check from 776 versus another firm. And it will keep happening until every other firm realizes they need to adopt a similar principle. We were inspired by another firm, Felicis, with a 1% program, and thought about ways that we could upgrade it. And I hope this becomes table stakes, because I know as a founder going through Y Combinator, learning that my mother was diagnosed with cancer, it would have made such a difference to know that there was dollars available, because I was a broke college kid who had raised, a little bit of money to start a company that had no revenue, and feeling so guilty with any amount of money that I was taking out personally, because I knew that was affecting our burn and our runway. To know that my investor had dollars available alone would have made a huge difference. And that's not to slight YC. This was the first batch. They were building a whole new paradigm for investing, but we've learned a lot in 16 years, and this is an opportunity for us to win in an even bigger way.
Well, and I want to talk broadly just about tech right now and sort of this current moment that we're in. Alexis, you're someone who knows social networks, having co-founded Reddit. When you look at the problems at Facebook that have been highlighted by the Journal's recent reporting and by the whistleblower Frances Haugen, what do you see as a solution to some of the issues that have been raised here?
Wow, how long is this session? I think, look, we have seen a lot over the last decade and a half. And at this point, every leader needs to look at what they want to ultimately be responsible for, because it is clear the effect these platforms have on a whole host of things. It is clear more broadly the effect that software businesses are having across every single industry, right? We're talking about one very specific, very important conversation, but this is happening across every single industry. And so one thing that's important for us is, we're making investments in the next generation. These are CEOs way smarter than I was, way more sophisticated, way more aware, because they've grown up in the shadow of the last 16 years of tech innovation and saturation, right? They've grown up attached to devices, plugged into the internet. They cannot plead naivete or ignorance because they realize software has won and it's going to continue to win. And so it's exciting to meet these new CEOs because they are aware of the responsibility and they don't try to play coy about, I'm still figuring things out or what have you. No, they're very comfortable actually leading, and they're very comfortable making hard decisions even earlier because they know that's going to be important for the success of the business. It's going to help them attract and retain the best talent. It's going to help them win markets, et cetera, et cetera. And so I just feel lucky, the experiences we've had, certainly not just founding Reddit, but where I met Caitlin, which was early in the turnaround, shaped a lot of my worldviews, and I got a front row seat to see Caitlin build a world-class product organization out of basically nothing in the span of 4 years. And we want to take those best principles and apply them to doing venture because at the end of the day, the people, the cultures in these companies are really what matters most.
Mm. And when I hear both of you talk, it seems to me that you're sort of hoping to chart a different future for tech, and in part by sort of supporting founders and kind of supporting them as whole people. I wonder though, just when you think about some of the biggest players in tech right now, would you like to see regulators put limits on Facebook and more broadly across social media? I just wonder sort of what you think needs to happen here.
I think regulators, often very well intentioned, end up using sledgehammers instead of scalpels. And the problem here is still a huge disconnect between, I hate to say it, but like the sort of where the conversation needs to be and where the conversation still is, just because there's not really a lot of tech fluency. There's a lot of learning that needs to happen on the side of regulators. And in a lot of ways, you look at crypto, you look at so many different sectors, there's a lot to catch up with, right? We're still just starting to have those conversations. And so my hope is actually that folks can get fully informed before making any regulatory decisions, because I just don't think we're there yet. And I actually trust a lot in the public to continue to talk about the things that matter, to continue to vote, maybe not with their dollars, but with their attention. I actually think that's going to be one of the greatest forces of change. We've seen in just the last year the adoption of Web3 companies or crypto-based companies. And I'm not just talking about, so I was a seed investor in Coinbase back in 2012, but even more recently, funding more and more companies, Rainbow, Lolly, QuickNode, Axie Infinity, that are at the heart of this Web3 shift. User experience and ultimately giving consumers what they want is actually a really, really, really powerful force and a counterbalance to the entrenched power that Web 2 platforms have. And so, I'm certainly betting on the side of innovation to keep sort of forcing folks to adopt better practices, because if they don't, they'll just lose customers. And that ultimately ends up being a really powerful effect.
Hmm. And Caitlin, I think about you as someone who spent a lot of time thinking about people and culture inside of technology companies. I just wonder, the startups that you're advising and these founders that you're talking with, it seems like in startup land, there's always this culture of transparency where there's this free exchange of information across departments. I just think about, sort of in the wake of whistleblowers, kind of, in this era of sort of heightened employee activism, should that information sharing still happen? Are you advising startups that anything, could or should change in that regard?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. You're also leading with an interesting assumption. Just because an industry talks about transparency and tells us that they are operating under the guise of transparency does not mean that they necessarily have been. And this is something, so keep in mind, I joined the world of HR or people and culture over a decade ago, right when the industry and that particular domain was transitioning from the back room into the boardroom. And so I was very fortunate enough to sit, when things really were dramatically shifting around the role of HR. So moving from compliance and T-crossing and I-dotting into really being a strategic partner. And so I think that, transparency in tech has really kind of ridden along that same wave. So in parallel with that need for having this accountability and really having these conversations in earnest. And more importantly, the open sourcing of our work so that we could be that strategic partner and so that we could best serve our users, right? So the folks that we are building our products for. And so being much more holistic in how we're running our companies. And I do think that tech has been on the bleeding edge of that. And I'm very, very heartened to see a lot of those best practices and some of those policies translate into other industries. I think it's critical. And so as we now are in this new era, this new awakening in a post-pandemic world, I think it's more critical now than ever. And so, this is one thing that we believe in very much at 776 is working with our founders on day zero to really set up their practices, their principles, and their policies, which I know sounds like a whole mouthful of boring, but trust me, it's not. So when we think about, for example, compensation design, our philosophy and transparency around compensation and ensuring that we do not have pay gaps, it's so much easier, actually. So again, a nod to the capitalist part of venture capital is ensuring that we don't have to undo a lot of work later down the road because we didn't do that work up front. And so I talk with our founders a lot about, more or less paying that transparency tax up front. Let's set up everything. I want you to be able to sleep at night. I want, if you accidentally hit send on an email that has everyone's compensation on it, I want you to be able to look everyone at your company in the eye and say, yeah, I feel like this was done in a fair and equitable way. And more importantly, you don't have to ask because you knew exactly the thinking that went into that. And compensation is just one example of transparency. But I do think, the ethics and values that it brings into question are really, really important. And so the better we can articulate and communicate and evolve these conversations internally, and more importantly, these conversations around our products and the products that we're building, it's only going to better serve not only our users, but at the end, the world in which we are having an impact. So I think it's a beautiful thing.
Mm. Well, what Caitlin is talking about here about sort of, the way that work evolves. I mean, I want to talk more about that. I mean, Alexis, you in 2019, when we still were able to meet in person, came to the Journal's Future of Everything Festival in New York, and you warned about always-on work culture. You talked about hustle porn and people often celebrating burnout. I wonder if you can give us your read on the state of work now in the remote era. Are the ways that we're working still broken, or are we thinking about our jobs differently?
I think I am pleased to say there are more conversations than ever about mental health and burnout. And I do think the satire that is hustle porn, it is pretty much largely ignored and ridiculed, as it should be. Like one of the nice benefits here is, the Venn diagram of people who really glorify and sort of overhype